Off top, the Memphis Grizzlies almost became the Memphis Mounties. What is it?
This is the Domonique Foxworth Show.
Welcome to the Domonique Foxworth Show. We're still in Miami, and I'm joined as usual by Charlie, the Vanilla Snack Kravitz, and we have a guest in who is, for whatever reason, shaking this weird basketball player's bobblehead in front of our faces. David Dennis Jr., proud graduate.
It's a Steph Davidson.
Honestly, you got a bobblehead of yourself right there.
Yeah, it did look more like you than it is Steph, to be clear. I remember that time when Steph was really good in the tournament and we were all introduced to this cute guy hitting all these shots and you were hanging around him being his buddy.
I was there.
I was
there. The school of Davidson drove us all to put us all in a bus to go to Detroit to watch the games. And it was incredible. It was really cool.
They put the whole school in a bus?
So they did a thing where they were like, as all schools do, where like you can pay to go and take a trip to Detroit to like watch your team play. And Davidson has all these like rich donors and rich whatever the people called. And they just said, if you want to go, you can go for free. So like
That's
half the school pretty much went. And the bus left at I think 3 a.m. So we went straight from the parties to the bus and rode the bus to Detroit and went straight to the game. And then spent a day, and they played Wisconsin and won, and then went to the hotel, which, again, also paid for by the school. And we stayed and hung out that day. And then the next day, they rented out a brewery for us to hang out before the game. And then we got and watched them lose in the last second to Kansas. I regret to inform you, I don't remember much of that game.
That sounds like a really awesome experience.
Are you a Jason Richards or an Andrew Lovedale guy?
I love both of them. They're the best. Lovedale is great. Jason Richards is great. I saw Jason at All-Star this a little while ago in February. Lovedale is cool. They're all great. Jason Richards. We were freshman dorm mates at Davidson.
Really?
So we go way back. Yeah,
that's great.
We were in the same dorm.
One of our producers is a huge Jason Richards fan. If you ever try and besmirch that Davidson basketball team, he's like, Jason Richards. You looked at him, you knew he was a pro. He was a pro's pro.
The glue guy for that team.
Yeah.
The shot almost barely missed the shot to beat Kansas, but a great dude nonetheless.
Can we talk about the Memphis? I'm assuming from your off top, by the way, before we get into some NBA. That was the Vancouver Mounties. That was almost
right. Yeah. And they wouldn't have changed the name because they never do that, except for when the Browns became the Ravens,
or the Sonics became the Thunder.
Yeah, it would have been this. I guess it happens every now and then. Yeah. But this team or this Ja Morant situation would have been a lot more interesting if the team was or not a lot more interesting, but would have been funnier if the team was named after mounted police officers. It's like, no, it's our team. I'm just showing you.
Mount up?
Yeah, you gotta mount up. Regulators, mount up.
I mean, can you imagine Zoe playing for the Mounties? Like even pre Ja Morant, like they're like just the Mounties in Memphis, just is an incredible sight.
It would
to
have
see.
changed everything. Like Tony Allen,
oh my
like
God.
the grindhouse thing it feels a little different if you are really the cops. Like the grindhouse would have been different. Tony Allen, Charlie told me a great Tony Allen story before the show started that almost became my off top. That Tony Allen changed his name in high school in order to be eligible to play high school football, and he scored like 6 touchdowns in one game, and then he had to disappear because college football scouts started showing up like, who's the 6'4" tight end that can't stop scoring touchdowns? He's like, oh, I was just playing on a pseudonym.
The gig was up. Do you know what his name was, David?
I have no clue. I can't wait to hear it.
Antonio Brown.
It was before the NFL's Antonio Brown, obviously.
This is like the Antonio Brown multiverse. That's like the story for the multiverse. Like all the Antonio Browns come and hang out and destroy the world.
It's amazing stuff. Okay, so we can talk some more NBA, but do you want to start with the Grizzlies stuff? I mean, this is a small story. We've talked a little bit about Taylor Jenkins this week, and there have been multiple reports about how he was out, why he was out. They gutted his staff over the offseason, so people think that this was the writing on the wall from the front office. There's been the reports that Ja was dissatisfied with the amount of touches, shots, etc. And whether it's right to give someone like Ja Morant the power to sort of remove a coach. And then within days, we have this mini controversy of him pulling out the hand blickies and pointing them at the Warriors bench. My favorite, I personally don't think it's that big a deal. The NBA has announced they're giving Ja Morant a warning for this. But my favorite part of it was when you zoom in on the video of Draymond Green immediately spotting it and running to the ref, getting his full Chris Paul on, being like, I can rat you out here. Get this guy out of the game. But am I wrong? Like, I don't know if I'm just desensitized to it, but like, even though it's Ja Morant, I just could not care less that he was doing this.
I think it's a timing thing, though. I think it's like a dude for real, like a seriously dude, like you. I think that's what it is. I think it is all sort of like compounded. Oh, in a vacuum, no, it's not a huge deal, but it's sort of compounded in this idea of like, there's no coach. You have had 6 injuries, 8 different body part injuries over the course of the season. You just lost to the Warriors after losing to the Lakers, after losing to the Celtics. I think they're going to be a play-in team.
Yeah.
And Ja Morant now is probably I don't think he stays in Memphis. And on top of that, as this has happened, you let Chiquita speak with your hands. Like, these are the things that like just compound to the entire Ja Morant story. At the end of what started at like the beginning, like in December, I was like, why aren't more people talking about the Grizzlies as the number 2 seed in the West and a potential title contender? And it has fallen apart in the course of like 3 months.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I ever thought of them as, or this season, without the turmoil that they now find themselves in, or the skid that they're now on. And they're playing across the street from us in a few hours. Maybe Charlie and I'll go watch them against the Heat. But I don't think I ever considered them as a real title contender. While they were always kind of a fun team, I think a couple years ago, we were like, this young team is headed in the right direction. And they, since then, have not been headed in the right direction. And I think Ja Morant's, part of it was a projection of what Ja Morant could become. And I don't think he's gotten any better than what he was.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I think it was partially like where the West was at the time. Like, you got to think about December, like OKC had just sort of lost that play-in tournament, which I mean, not the play-in, the mid-season tournament, which I know is not a huge deal to a lot of people. They had just lost to Milwaukee. They looked like, is this team playoff ready? Like, who's actually a championship contender, right? Jamal Murray was not looking great for the Nuggets. Like, the West just looked wide open in a way that it does not look now with Doncic and Jimmy Butler. And you look at this Grizzlies team, right? Jaren Jackson has made an incredible leap on both sides. I mean, the defense was always great, but offensively, he had stepped up. Desmond Bane was looking great. Zach Edey looked like sort of this untapped thing. And then it was like, okay, when Ja Morant is fully healthy and comes back, this team could turn into like the team that you don't want to face in the West. But what happened is everything stayed flat or got worse. Zach Edey, they never unleashed him because part of that is Taylor Jenkins. Ja Morant kept getting more other injuries. Jaren Jackson can't stay on the court. He fouls too much. And everybody else in the West got so much better that this Memphis team, to me, has become the team you want to face in the playoffs.
Yeah, and you're talking about the what we thought Memphis could be a few years ago, too. Russillo's pointed this out, that Ja Morant's third season, he shot almost 35% from 3, and he shot 50% from the field. That we thought was a step in the direction of what he was going to be as a basketball player, where you can't go under screens, and like maybe he was going to be slightly different than the Rose and Russ type of elite athlete point guards. It's just completely regressed. He was 28% from 3 last year. He's at 30% this year on 5 per game. To me, it's like, actually, if you're looking at assets on the roster, you said the name is Jaren Jackson Jr. Like, you can, of course, he's a number 2 or a number 3 on a great team because he plays like a supercharged role player, like a superstar role player. But still, to me, that's the asset that you have, that you want to retain, that can fit with anything. If you need to trade Ja Morant, that's okay. And that might be a hard pill to swallow because he's one of the most popular players in the NBA, and he's been sort of the soul of this team. And there's no guarantee that you're going to get real return for someone that seems incredibly unstable. But I wouldn't be that afraid of it if you're the Grizzlies at this point.
Ja is kind of a classic NBA archetype where he is a really good player when the team is designed for him to have the success. And I think what you're saying about Jaren Jackson is every team in the league. It's like, oh yeah, we can find a spot for Jaren Jackson.
Literally every team. You could stick him next to another center.
Right.
It doesn't matter.
And I think that's the thing with Ja, when you have a player like that, is like, all right, if our goal is to win a championship, he has to be the number one player for us to get the most out of him? And are we the best version of ourselves with him as the number one player? Can he get to that point? And if the shooting never comes around and the super athlete, it's never been enough to get it done.
So what's really interesting is I think 3 years ago, we didn't think that was going to be the case.
Right.
Not just because of the jump shooting, but when he was like full leadership John Morant, he's not heliocentric. He's fine playing off the ball. He's fine letting Desmond Bane and Jaren Jackson run possessions. He cuts. Like, he was an incredible cutter. That's why he got some like Dwayne Wade comps early in his career for the cutting, and the like you saw half court dunks with John Morant because of the way he moved off the ball. But yeah, he doesn't seem like the same player. And we had the story earlier this year about him wanting to dunk less, but to me that's less about injuries and more about he's sort of lost what made him ultra special on the floor.
Yeah, like, take a snapshot of like 2022 Memphis Grizzlies, right? Game 1 against Golden State Warriors. Like, this was a moment where you say the Grizzlies could be a championship level team. They just have to get past the Warriors. Look at John Morant in that series. Look at John Morant 3 years later. I can't think of a single thing he's gotten better at. And that's not a good sign for a superstar of that level. You look at all the rest of those playoff teams and the top stars in those playoff teams, a lot of them have gotten better at something. John Morant has either gotten worse as a shooter, gotten less reliable health-wise, or just flat out just got worse at all the things that you thought he would get better at. And that is not a sustainable thing for a team to build around, especially as we've all mentioned, when you have the Jaren Jackson of the world who you can actually build a team around.
I'd like to propose a fake trade, and I think this would work.
All
for
right,
everyone.
here we go.
A straight up trade of John Morant for Zion Williamson.
I knew you were going to say it.
It is perfect. It is, but like Trey Murphy, Herb Jones, all of the shooting in New Orleans is perfect to build around for John Morant, and Jaren Jackson might be the ultimate person to put directly next to Zion.
I mean, all the shooting around in New Orleans is perfect to put around Zion also.
Yeah, but
like, it's just like, get healthy, Zion.
No, there is a culinary quagmire in Louisiana that
I think
hey, Memphis barbecue is nothing to sneeze at. Also,
we actually were talking
now.
about this before the show.
We were.
When anyone says they have the best ribs in the world, if it's not in Memphis, you're just lying.
It's Memphis or Jackson, Mississippi, but nobody talks about Mississippi.
No respect for Kansas
no
City.
respect for Jackson.
What about
underrated?
Kansas City? No respect for Kansas City barbecue.
It's great. Austin.
It's not Memphis though.
Just purely for ribs. I'm just talking purely baby back ribs.
I do also think that there might be some other temptations that are not culinary. For that,
what are you gonna do? You gonna get Zion a flip phone? like otherwise, like, it doesn't matter.
That's the point I'm making. It's like, I don't think that's.
I think
sit down with Andrew Luck and get him his old flip phone.
I think Zion's vices travel pretty well.
Yeah, they get flued out. I know we want to talk about some rule changes. This Memphis team, whenever I think of this Memphis team, I think about how Desmond Bane looks like a running back playing basketball.
Yeah.
And it drives me nuts. Or he looks like a TV, like if you were watching a sitcom, the person who they would cast to play a basketball player because they don't know what basketball players look like. They're just like, hey, that guy looks strong. He looks like an athlete. It's like, no. Most basketball players actually look lean. They don't look like Desmond Bane, who look like he could give you 1,500 yards right now off the couch.
He's 6'5",
He looks like the
230.
scary antagonist from what's the CW, the football show, the American
All American.
He looks like the outside the like antagonist from the rival school who shows up and everybody's like, oh, this dude is really good. You don't want anything with him, and it's just Desmond Bane.
I mean, he
looks like Dwayne Martin. He just looks like beefed up Dwayne Martin. That's really what it is.
I know he's tall, but when he's out there on the court, he looks like he just looks too big, like a running back. Which I mean, he plays well. All right, Charlie.
This is just that football debate. It's like the football basketball player debate of like what.
It's not a debate.
I know. I'm just saying. Well, look, your ilk was real salty about it.
Not me.
You.
Day one, I was like, hey, guys, they're better athletes than us. I'm sorry. Desmond Bane definitely. I mean, we just talked about it at the beginning of the show. It was like Desmond Bane, hell of an edge rusher. Desmond Bane, great tight end. We talked about Tony Allen
Yeah.
just rolled out on a football field in high school, got 6 touchdowns.
This is when you get to lean back in your chair and you get to go, NBA players, they're like butter in the sun. They're soft.
They're not.
I know.
Like,
that's what you have to do that as the NFL guy.
I try not to be a liar. I try to be honest. I told you.
I just wanted to get the line off.
The other day,
let's be clear about it. It's okay.
I was talking about how I ran into Julius Peppers. It was like Julius Peppers was a mediocre college basketball player.
Started 3 games in 2 years at North Carolina.
Quite possibly one of the best defensive ends in NFL history. Come on, guys. We just aren't the same. It's okay. It's okay to admit it.
Yeah.
Desmond Bain is actually built like the Saratoga water guy. Actually, what do you think?
Ashton, what do you think about Saratoga water guy? David?
Well, first of all, a football player who went to Alcorn State University, by the way.
Does Saratoga give him any money? They should have sent him
I know.
at least 10,000.
Yeah.
He's hustling backwards. They had to, because did you see the one where he dropped the glass water bottle? And then it was like, oh, I've got Saratoga instead. That's actually a Saratoga ad.
I think you assume that everyone knows what we're talking about, but there's a guy on social media that everyone's been kind of mocking and making fun.
What?
If you listen to the Domonique Foxworth Show, everybody knows. Come on.
Normally I would say like we live online. That video, after like 3 days, had 800 million views on Twitter.
I just said we have to. There's one person out there, and I feel like David just insulted me.
Yeah.
If you're watching the Domonique Foxworth Show, you know Saratoga water guy. What'd you try to say? You try to say that's my fan base?
I was with you on Frenchman. I saw everybody like, hey brother, you speaking to Papa, with the all that. Those folks know what the Saratoga water guy is.
Yeah, if you weren't black, I would be offended by that impersonation you just did. Hey brother, it's speaking about Papa.
Hey brother, I see you out there. Word up.
David, Domonique has been waiting for 2 years for me to slip up and do an impression like that.
I can't wait. I've been doing this show this whole time because Charlie does remind people that I get that all the time, but he does it in his voice. He doesn't do that racist foolishness.
Oh, I could do it because the calls come from inside the house. I could do it. They were like, hey, brother, you so.
Bata Dubai is my favorite part of your old black man impersonation because I've never heard an old black man say Bata Dubai, but I understood what it meant.
Talking that jive stuff on the podcast, brother. I like it.
Why all my fans? Why were their coolest days in the 70s? Talking about, oh, you talking that job. Don't let Stephen A. get away with that job. All right, Charlie, what's next?
We should talk about this week. I think the biggest ongoing sports story has just been we're in the rules part of the calendar. It's dry enough that it's Rulegate this week, and it's across sports. We talked a little bit about the tush push, how there's already an NFL rule that you can't pull players, right. And now salty GMs are being like, we should eliminate the tush push. It's not in the spirit of the game. Sean McVay is the only one who's willing to go on record and really say that, but we know that it's come from the Packers, it's come from other teams.
I'm on record. Eliminate it. Go ahead.
Torpedo bats became a thing. We love torpies here. Just the fact that more dingers is sweet, and people want that outlawed. That's not fair because the Yankees hit so many home runs. And then Kirk Goldsberry proposed, he's always been a tinkerer about how he thinks the game could be more fun. He's proposed eliminating the corner three in the NBA by extending the arc. And I want to know what you guys think about this because we have had games this year where there were 75 missed threes in Bulls Charlotte. We've had the Celtics really pushing the limit of the amount of threes taken per game. An incredible stat, and the three is a huge part of this, is that the 7 seconds or less Suns would be 28th in pace in the current NBA. With just the amount of shots taken, the fact that there are now more missed threes in a game than missed twos. So when you see a proposal like this, do you like that? Is that something you would be interested in as an adaptation of the game that doesn't feel gimmicky, or would that feel gimmicky to you guys?
I just don't like all the rules in general and proposed rules things. Like, rules do not make sports better. Mm-hmm. They just don't. And like, if we take the basketball aspect of it, changing the 3-point line and doing all the stuff with threes is not going to change the fact that bad players are going to continue taking bad shots. Bad players took bad twos before there was a 3-pointer. Like the NBA has always been full of bad shots. Like, take me to the golden era of the NBA when everybody ran a beautiful game of basketball, everybody got the perfect shot. No, the Lakers of the 80s may have done that, the Celtics may have done that, Bulls, Warriors, players like that, but there was always going to be a Charlotte Hornets, a Chicago Bulls who miss 75 threes. They're not taking threes. They're going to miss 80 mid-range jumpers. Rules and litigating this stuff, and that's across the board. Litigating bats, litigating tush-push things. More, I have always been a component of not having any replays in any sports at all because they make the game slower and worse, and referees are not actually getting any better at refereeing. Like, rules just make sports worse, and the more we do rules, the more we're going to make sports kind of boring and not cool.
The one thing I'll say is that I do feel less committed to the current 3-point line. It in itself was a gimmick. It was from the ABA. It was something to try and make the game differentiated. It's completely arbitrary, and there's nothing preordained about where it is. Like, we've seen it different in the college game towards the NBA game. We've seen them move it up for a year when guys went crazy shooting it in the mid-90s. So it's like the concept of really what you're doing if you get rid of the corner three is you're changing space. You're changing spacing. Yes. You're going to change where the role guys go on the floor. Offenses might seem less monotonous. And the NBA is the only basketball league that hasn't changed the three-point distance since the year 2000. So I'm fine with it, honestly. It will make guys like Damian Lillard and Stephen Curry even more valuable as guys who can excel at different spots. It just, series shouldn't be determined by Rockets role players going 0 for 27 as they continue to feed the ball into the corner.
Changing rules is important. Adding rules is important. So just a general idea of hating rules, I think what we hate, and maybe this is closer to what you were thinking, David, is I hate the rules that I recognize or that I see that get in the way.
Gimmicky.
Yeah. Or even when it's gimmicky in order to fix the game, that's bad also. So the idea of adding a 4-point line, that would feel gimmicky. The way that you do this is that you do it incrementally, and you do it before you have to do it, and you do it in a way that people don't recognize you. And that's part of the problem is we've gotten too late. And so we can talk about each of these things individually. Generally overarching, torpedo bat, tush push, in the corner three, I think they all need to be addressed, and they may not all be right for you or may not all be right for the sport, but they're all things that need to be consciously addressed, and you can't just turn a blind eye to it, because I think if you do that, then you end up in a situation where it's too late. The reason why the corner three, I think, is where we start, because it's the easiest yes of all of these, is because the idea of the corner three itself, I think having the idea of having a 3-point line, you need it to be uniform. The idea that it's actually closer at some part of the court, to me, is absurd in the first place.
Yeah.
Right? It's encouraging them to take these shots that aren't fun. The whole point, and we talked about this with rule changes in football. Rule changes in football are designed for one of two things. It's for player safety, or it's to encourage the type of play that we think is fun and entertaining to watch. The problem with making the shortest, most valuable shot kind of boring, that, to me, you're not encouraging the right.
To me, it's also that it's uniformed. You're not encouraging the right
style of play.
Yeah. And to me, it says uniform. So I didn't mean to cut you off. It's before the big crescendo. But it's uniform, because you see this sort of in. Baseball is a weird example when to connect it to this, is that the parks are shaped differently.
Right.
So the Yankees have always wanted lefties who, if you hit a deep pop fly to right field, it can be a home run. That might be an out in a lot of ballparks, but that's the way that they've built their stadium. Coors Field wants guys who are going to elevate the ball. Different stadiums, different. But because this is uniform in the NBA has been able to homogenize role players and to be doing this one thing that's increased value in a way that's made the role players more valuable, easier to scout, finding this entire 3D generation, and it doesn't feel as special. And that's the thing that I think you could potentially eliminate by just making it a true arc.
I wonder. Sorry, go ahead, David.
Well, you brought up a good point. Let each arena pick their own 3-point line.
Great idea.
Let's do that. Let's just do that. Make it like baseball. Let every arena decide. Let Golden State be like, we're going to make this thing 35 feet, and we only our player can make threes. Let's just go crazy with it. I mean, to me, where I struggle with it all is that coaches and teams and schemes just are not good for most of the NBA. Right? Mm-hmm. You take away the corner three, you're going to still have bad basketball for years until these teams figure this thing out. You know what I'm saying? You are trading away one homogenous form of basketball to one incredibly bad form of basketball for a lot of the league for a few years until people
the mid 2000s was brutal.
I mean,
Yeah.
you could argue that if you take away the corner three, that players would pack the paint, and there's no reason to the defenses would encourage them to take that corner too. They'd force guys into the corner, and they would make it harder. Like I'm not saying that I generally think that this is a fix-all.
You'd have to widen the lane also, so that guys couldn't. You'd have to make it more a wider spot for that.
Generally, I'm just saying it's something that's worth considering. And so, like, I don't think this is the fix-all for whatever ails NBA basketball, but it does feel like we're getting to a point where it's a little too late. Getting to the point where baseball got.
So the thing I'll say about that is I don't think so. I actually disagree with that. I think that whatever fix you make to the NBA, like the on-court product, because like what Silver's done is he's tried to like reallocate value to certain games, whether it's the play-in or the midseason tournament or whatever. That seems to be the priority of this. But I think teams will adjust and find efficiency whatever rule changes you make, and it will have a period where it feels awkward. But I think it's like that's not permanent to me. These guys are all so good now. The skill is so diversified in the NBA that any adjustment you make, it's still gonna end up being really good basketball.
But I guess my point is, if you're changing the rules, it's in order to encourage something else. If you think about it like from an evolutionary standpoint, if you put only tall trees with leaves at the top, you're going to end up with the game evolving to a lot of giraffes. Sorry for the silly analogy, but that's the way that I think about it is we know what we're going to get if we make these tweaks. What I don't understand is if we accept that what we're getting now is not what we want, why aren't we willing to change the environment in hopes that we'll get – that's the part – and the reason why I bring up baseball is baseball's always been the sport of the American sports that is hesitant. And it's like, we got to hold on to this. Is that not like a canary in the coal mine for everyone for these other sports? And I think that – I guess I'm saying for these other sports, like football hasn't done that. Football's done it.
Yeah.
Every time something happens in football that encourages something that they don't like, they bring it to the rules committee and they address it.
So it's interesting that you said is one of the things that's interesting is baseball brought in Theo Epstein to be someone who sort of instituted. He was the better or the best version of the Billy Bean. Like, let's have analytics build our models to pick teams that can succeed over 162 games and have the best chance of succeeding in the playoff sample size. You now have that a little bit in basketball. It's Daryl Morey. Frankenstein's monster has been like, there are too many threes now. The thing that I created has bastardized the game I love.
I mean,
and I understand Daryl Moore is like, somebody who is forward thinking in the way that we think about offenses. I think that my issue is what I'm struggling with is you change the 3-point line, like the Warriors and the Lakers play tonight. If they have a 4:00 meeting and they say we're changing the 3-point line, they will be fine and they'll have a compelling version of basketball because Steph and LeBron can adapt. The Orlando Magic, that offense, it'll take them forever to figure out how to make it. And also because these rosters are constructed in such a way that's based on this 3-point line. I just think we're going to be looking at, like you mentioned, the mid 2000s with the way things look. Then we're going to look at some bad basketball. Now, if the NBA is willing to endure some of that bad basketball and some of these weird years to get to an overall better product, then I think that's possible.
But I guess when I hear you say that, it sounds to me like you're assuming that there are no repercussions for not changing it. Maybe you're right. If you change the rules, it might take a minute for guys and teams to adjust their rosters and adjust their style of play. There'll be some games that are worse than they would have been otherwise. But the alternative is, in my view at least, is you don't address it. And the game turns into what baseball kind of became is like a game where it's just home runs and outs.
Three true outcomes.
Yeah, and we're less entertained by it. So, like, if you're looking at it, and often when you're a head of a company or president of a country or a commissioner of a league, the decisions, you're choosing between bad options.
Yeah.
And I think the less bad option, in my view at least, is that we got a couple bad games and it's going to take a few years for teams and players to adjust. And I think I want to reiterate the fact that I'm not arguing that Kirk Goldsberry solved whatever issues we have with the homogenization of basketball by removing the corner three. I'm arguing more generally as like, it's okay. Like, I want the tush push out because I feel like that encourages the wrong behaviors, a less entertaining product for football. I don't have a strong opinion about the torpedo bat. The things that I read suggest that it's not as overpowering as we thought, in that it's more of a correction because pitching has gotten so scientific and so effective that the batting averages has gone down tremendously. So, like, from what I understand, the torpedo bat feels like it could be the opposite, where it's like we're moving back towards something more interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you talk about it being too late for some of these leagues and all that stuff. Part of it is like, it would be nice for there to be sort of a long-term plan that's based on incrementalization, right, of this stuff. Right. Like, maybe not taking away corner three, but like maybe extending the three and doing somewhere.
Put it in the G League. Let us watch it in the G League for a little bit.
And a lot of these rules in the NBA that have worked have started in these G Leagues and things like that. Baseball, with the way we're calling strikes now, the automated stuff started in these minor leagues. Like, I think that there's an incrementalization that we can adapt that can sort of guide the league and hold everybody's hands to a better game to make it sort of make sense. But we're not going to ever litigate out bad shots and bad games in the NBA.
They did it last year. All of a sudden they started calling,
prison rules.
Yeah, they stopped calling fouls. Like, and we all thought the games were better and more entertaining and more interesting. It's okay to change. Don't be scared to change. Don't be a Luddite.
And to me, it's like even beyond legislating bad shots out of the game. It's about getting away from monotony. Is the biggest thing. And like, that's the, when you make the baseball comparison, there's a reason that there was something called the dog days of summer, when people lost interest and players lost interest and there were more days off. It's like as the NBA chases optimization, we've created a part of the season that feels less optimized unless you're in one of those teams, and there's more monotony in the style of play. And, quite frankly, like, the NBA's cornered itself by putting it in this position. That's the reason it feels so radical to do this, because of the homogeny. I said homogeny of the way that their style of play is. And I just don't think it's too late. I think these changes will be adapted to really easily.
You might get a little bad press. There'll be some purists who call you names, but those purists aren't going anywhere. They love the game. The
purists don't want the 3-pointer in there in the first place.
The real purists are like, get it out of the game altogether.
I do like the idea, though, of if the NBA wanted to legislate bad shots out of the game, Adam Silver, just like he's going up to ban Donald Sterling, is like, Jordan Poole, you're banned for life.
That's just a DC-based thing. I don't think anyone else cares about Jordan Poole's bad shots but you.
That's right. So you want to talk some torpies, Domonique?
Let's do some torpy talk.
So torpedo bats have obviously become one of the fun stories of the early part of the MLB season, with the Yankees using them to, I think this is correct, mash 1 million dingers in one game. Yes. And essentially what they are, they fit all the specifications that MLB has put out for what your wooden bat can be, with the barrel size, length, weight, etc. But it's redistributing mass so that there's a larger sweet spot. The sweet spot goes further down the bat, so if you make the right contact, you have a better chance of hitting it quickly or hitting it cleanly. I kind of think they're awesome and don't know why they would be outlawed.
I mean, I think the argument for outlawing it is that it feels like an unfair advantage, but everyone can do it, and I think it makes it easier for the batters, which, like, I would be on board for that as an argument if it wasn't for the fact that it does feel like we've been, like, since the steroid era, it feels like we've been on a trajectory that made it harder for the batters, where teams are more likely to shift based on the batter. Pitchers have gotten better and better. They change pitchers more often. You don't have guys who are tired after going 7 innings for 3 or 4 starts in a row. Like, it feels like this is the first innovation, and maybe a more baseball-centered fan would push back on this, but it feels like all the innovation and all things have gone towards making it more difficult for batters. This is the first innovation that feels like it pushes back in the other direction. What I think is offensive to people generally is it's a tool, and you can see it. If we were if someone was like, I figured out a new swing stance that improves everything, we would feel entirely different than, because it feels cheaty if you're like, hey, we're going to redistribute the weight on this bat to make it easier for you to hit home runs. That feels a little bit like you're taking advantage.
Well, also, it's just not cool. It's just not a cool story. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Like, that's just what it is. Like, it's just not a story about, like, these dudes got in the gym and they learned how to, like, work their muscles and they could hit a home run really far. Like, I'm doing a lot of voices today, but it's not. It's not like it's this kid from MIT figured out how to redistribute weight in bats and use, like, some algebraic equation to make bats heavier in a certain spot, and people are hitting home runs. Like, it just doesn't have like this sort of mythology behind it that I think fans can grapple onto, and especially the way that it started with the Yankees hit a million home runs. Social media goes crazy and says this thing feels like cheating, and everybody's talking about like this is the worst thing ever. There's that to overcome, but I think in general the story just doesn't sound cool. Yeah. It's just not a cool story for people to grapple onto.
I think that the second I heard torpedo bats, I was in. Period. Nah. Like if they're called like fat bats,
absolutely.
If they're called like fat bats, I'd be like, I don't know about this one. But the torpies.
I think David's onto something though. I think you're probably right about that. Is if it were about some intense training regimen or some tweak
or switching the stance, like you said, like
something that you could be like, it's rooted in a player. The idea that the protagonist in this story is an MIT nerd, it's like, that's whack.
The thing that I'll say, and so I was thinking about other sports with clubs. Mm-hmm. As how this has happened over time, and baseball's largely been able to avoid a sort of revolution for this because the bats are made of wood, and that's the rule, and wood is wood, and wood's been the same since they started playing baseball. But it's happened in tennis and in golf. And in tennis, it was the invention of polyester strings, which basically ended serve and volley and made people play from the baseline. And you can see Rafael Nadal and guys be able to rotate the ball so much more because they have strings that will snap back into place. And when it happened, Pete Sampras was pissed. He was the best tennis player of all time, and he called the brand Luxlon, which has made the most popular polyester strings ever, he called it Cheetalon. And he went in press conferences, and at the time people were like, oh, is this going to change the way they play the game? And it led to the greatest era of tennis ever, and it made it a bigger sport worldwide with Federer, Nadal, and Djokovic all using polyester in their setup. Hybrids for Federer and Djokovic, but full for Nadal. But the counter to that is what could happen in golf, which is you juice the balls, you have bigger headed drivers, you have irons that continue straighter and straighter and straighter. And what it does is it takes someone like 1997 Tiger Woods, who was swinging his shorter steel-shafted driver harder than anyone in history, who was able to do certain things with the golf ball that were completely unique, and it made the game driver wedge for everyone. I'm going to hit it farther, I'm going to hit it straighter, the ball's going to spin as much as I want. And so the fear with torpedo bats is or any of these technological advancements, we want to enhance the best players to make them more special, not level the playing field for everyone else. And so I think that the torpedo bats, the hope is that long term, this has the best hitters being able to face off better against the best pitchers. It doesn't take everyone to the 20 home run like threshold.
Yeah, no, I think that's important. Is there's a question that you have to ask, and I think paramount is there's one thing that you want to decide, and all the other impacts after that have to fall in line, and you figure out whether it's something you want to keep or not. And I think the guiding principle in all of these is this going to make the sport better to watch?
It's all the same thing. It's homogeny. Yeah. It's corner threes, strikeouts, 3 true outcomes.
Right, but I mean, I think you could have made the argument based on what you presented about tennis is like this may not make the sport better to watch. Ultimately, it had.
It did.
But
yeah.
You could make the argument at the beginning, and I think that's the question we don't have a complete answer to, but you need to project and figure out, because I think that when Tiger was dominating, you could argue that, all right, how about we introduce clubs that make everyone else a little bit more competitive? That's going to make the sport better to watch.
Yeah.
And it hasn't. And I think you could make the same argument. You can make either argument for the torpedo bat. It's like, hey, this is going to make it better to watch. Or you're going to say, hey, it's going to make bad batters better. And we're just going to end up seeing bad batters get a little bit better. And it makes the special batters look less good, and it makes the great pictures look less great. And that's a hard question. I think this is where it gets difficult to lead these type of leagues and to be a commissioner, because ultimately you don't get to make this decision unilaterally. First, you have to figure out what the truth is. Then you got to convince everybody to vote for it, right?
Yeah, I mean, the tough part here is that there's no leveling of the playing field when one side has a bat and another does. Like with tennis, both people had rackets, right?
Yeah.
With golf, you can change the course in ways that make things more difficult. Now, if you're baseball, you have to weigh the option of, like, are people ever going to get tired of home runs? Is home runs going to be the homogenous thing when that's what people came for? And also on the fact is, like, pitchers are going to have certain technologies to make them better, but they're not going to, I don't think they're going to have anything equivalent to a torpedo bat to compete against this. So now you're wondering if this becomes lopsided in a way that it doesn't happen with tennis, because you have two torpedo bats.
But isn't baseball already homogenous?
Yeah.
Like, baseball is already homogenous, right? That's already it, where we're in a situation where everyone's swinging for the fences. You either get struck out, you pop out, or you hit a home run, right? What people want more of in baseball is like guys diving for passes and turning or diving for hits and turning double plays in order to make it exciting, right?
Yeah,
and base
also,
running
and a little bit, and also like the pitching, the way that the last couple of years has been the optimization of pitching,
right?
Which is everyone throws 100. They've been able to max out velocity in a way that I promise you 20 years ago, if we had this discussion, we would have been like, there's not going to be a time when they're just trotting out openers who are going to throw one inning to start a game and then a bunch of mid-relievers, everyone who can see the lineup once and throw 100 miles an hour. There just aren't enough guys. And we've been able to do what they were able to do is build a throwing mechanics and a throwing program and using heavy balls and drive line and all this that it's like out of the factory. Someone gets hurt, someone gets Tommy John, you bring up the next guy from AA or AAA who throws 100 who has a certain amount of swing or cut on his fastball. And to me, it's like if you're finding a way to get more contact on the baseball, more sweet spot, like we only think about this for home runs. There are going to be more driven baseballs because of this.
Right. And I think that's just the limitations of our imagination.
Yeah.
Because there wasn't like the introduction of like a wrist brace that allows you to throw 100 or the introduction of a ball that's laced differently so that guys throw faster, that we feel like somehow the science of improving pitching is less offensive to the nature of the game than introducing these torpedo bats, and it happened over time. It wasn't overnight, but I don't think that there's a huge difference between torpedo bats and the scientific improvements of pitching that's made it much harder to get hits.
Yeah, do you want a couple minutes on the tush push of what you think about this?
I mean, I've done this a couple of times already, but generally I think the tush push, and we've done all the setup through this other conversation, is I think the reason why the tush push should be banned is because I think it encourages the wrong things in the game. Like, it encourages things, and I can't predict what the evolution of the game will be as a result of the tush push. But I can say that if you take it out the game, I won't miss it. Mm-hmm. It's not a play that I'll miss. And if you don't take it out of the game, it's such an important play that teams will start to adjust the way that they construct their roster and the way that they approach these game plans in order to address the tush push, which leads to more players that are doing things in a game that I am not interested in. I'd much rather, if you could remove the tush push and replace it with quarterback sneaks, I'd be happier. If you could remove it and replace it with like runs, like real traditional football runs, I'd be much happier. Or even short passes. Like, to me, that's the reason why the tush push should be out, is because it encourages the wrong things, and losing it wouldn't hurt me. Now, it becomes a much more difficult decision if taking a tush push out. And like when we talked about the rule changes for hitting quarterbacks below the knee, that was a more difficult one for me to accept, because I'm like, I don't want to take the aggressiveness away from the defenders, because this is something about football that I like. But ultimately, I think they made the right decision. We get great quarterbacks, healthier, longer, more fun games to watch.
Yeah.
Yeah, I am pretty agnostic about the tush push itself and its inclusion in the game. I think like the method of removing it is kind of what's bothering me about the tush push. Is like the things that you mentioned, and correct me if I'm wrong, the things that you mentioned about why you want to get rid of it, it doesn't feel as though that's why the owners want to get rid of it, right? The way that it is sort of being marketed out is like that this is an unfair advantage for like two teams.
Right.
And that to me feels like a really sort of lame reason to get rid of a tush push, even though there are some legitimate reasons that I'm with you. If I'm watching a football game, I want to see a handoff for on 4th and 1 more than I want to see a tush push. I kind of roll my eyes and I say this is going to be a foregone conclusion. It's going to be a first down. That's not a fun thing to watch. But I don't think that's really where the argument is being held for the most part. When that conversation comes up, it just feels like a bunch of owners saying, I don't like the fact that these two teams can get away with it.
You're right. I mean, I feel like that's part of the holdup in the conversation, though. That's part of the holdup in the conversation, is that people are like, just stop it, why don't you? Or Eagles fans feel like picked out, and it's like, it's not about you. It's about something else.
Look, Eagles fans already hate our podcast.
Of course.
So I got no fear in saying this. I think this discussion has actually made me come to realize where I fall on all these issues. Is it boring or not? Like, I'm sorry. Like home runs, not boring.
Yeah.
Too many corner threes, boring. Tush push, the NFL's superpower is that they don't have boring games and they don't have boring plays. They created a boring play in Philadelphia. So, like, all right, Roger, your job, protect the shield, get rid of the tush push.
You said all the things that I said much more quickly and much more direct. It's right
But
there.
it's just connecting it all.
It's just simple. It doesn't make the game boring. If it does, get it out.
If you get rid of the tush push, can we bring back a reasonable onside kick situation here, please?
Yeah.
Like, we were talking about boring. There's nothing more boring right now in the NFL than a team being down 2 scores with like a minute and a half left.
I mean,
bring me some sort of reasonable onside kick, please.
I mean, I think 4th and 20 is the answer to that.
Yeah.
It's like, let's introduce a 4th and 20 play, and that's how you get it done. It seems like, I don't know what the probabilities are on that, but because now it's just foregone conclusion. Onside kick's not going to work.
Yeah.
It's never working. It stinks. The game's over when you're up by 2 scores with a certain amount of time left. I love the 4th and 20 because then we would get some real cool, creative plays. We get some lateral stuff. We would get special situations. I think that makes the game more interesting, right?
That's perfect.
Yeah. All right, thanks a lot, David Dennis Jr. You were great. I appreciate all the great producers. Charlie Kravitz, the man, as usual. Thanks to Metal Lark for a wonderful week in this beautiful studio. We out.
It's been great being here, man.
Ba-da-ba-da-ba.
Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
This is the Domonique Foxworth Show.